subscribe.
Hi everybody and welcome back. My name's Alison, the online piano and the online violin tutor. This is just a quick little video on 6 tips on how to pimp up or improve your student quality violin. So let's just say you've got yourself a violin from eBay for 50 quid, or a second-hand one, or a Stentor II, or a Celio, or I don't know, anything like that, anything that's kind of student quality, anything around the £100, $150 kind of mark, roughly that kind of thing. These are just a few little things that you can do right now, straight away, yourself, into slightly improving the tone of your violin and just improving your violin overall. Now, because you are kind of pimping up or improving your violin, it's not going to make a vast amount of difference. I'm just talking a small but noticeable enough difference, and it's worth doing as well. But you know, it's not going to all of a sudden sound like a 10 grand violin or something like that and you've just paid $100. Obviously you're going to get what you pay for. So it will be noticeable and it will be worth doing, but you know, it's not just suddenly going to jump, it won't increase in value and it won't jump to being thousands of pounds worth of instrument. So I would say the first thing that you could do is buy yourself a better set of strings. Now, you will only get a cheap standard set of strings on the violin that you get at the to start with. If you've got it off eBay, or I don't know, you've just got a Chinese violin, or you know, a student quality violin from a shop. And the one thing you've got to be doing is careful with the E string, because the E string especially and the A string can be very, very thin because they are very cheap quality. So when if you're trying to tune the pegs, you're most likely to break them if you're not careful enough. But they're very cheap strings. You know, you could pick it up, you could pick a new set up for well under £10 or $10-ish for an entire set of strings. I pay 3 times as much of that just for my G string, for example. So getting a better set of strings will massively improve the tone, the sound, the feel, the silkiness and the quality of the violin as well. So the ones I recommend are dominant strings. You can get them all over the world. They are probably the industry standard, just to get the Tomastic dominant strings. They're in UK, I'll put links to them, but in the UK they're about £37 for a set if you get them on Amazon. I'll put the link underneath. I'll try and find one for the USA or Amazon.com version as well if I can. There are other strings out there. Strings are an absolute minefield. I will do a video on strings and things, but you can get Parastro strings, I don't know, tons of strings, but dominants are, I suppose, a good bog standard string. They're not too expensive, they're not too cheap. You can obviously get cheaper strings, but I sort of think that if you're trying to improve the tone and you're trying to get a nicer sound out of the violin, why would you kind of defeat the object of that by buying some kind of semi-okay strings? Because I don't think they're going to do they're going to do as well as dominants for you. So another tip, or tip number 2, would be investing in a better bow. You might not sort of possibly appreciate a better bow straight away, simply because you won't sort of have developed the skills or the techniques and things, but for the purpose of the sound straight away, you will get a slightly nicer sound because the bow won't be so thick, the bow won't be so heavy, the hair on the bow will be of much nicer quality as well. So getting a nicer bow will help improve the tone and the sound, along with the strings and things, that kind of thing. Okay. Tip number 3, playing your violin, actually physically playing your violin. Violins tend to, I know it sounds really bizarre, but violins warm up over time. So when I was trying out this one, it felt a little cold and I knew it needed to be warmed up and played. And I know it sounds weird that the more you play it, the sound changes, but to be perfectly honest, I'm not quite sure what it is about it that changes, but it's just it's just moving everything about in it. It's just playing it. It's just playing the instrument and making it all work and everything. That kind of warms the sound up, and the sound comes together to create the warm sound that you're going to get, and the tone that eventually you're going to get from the violin. It's just like wearing in a new pair of shoes, I guess. So it felt cold when I was playing it, but I could feel that there was going to be a nice tone that was starting to come through. So even though you might have a student quality violin, to start with, it will sound very, very cold, very unbroken, very, I suppose just very cold, but the more you play it, the more you will get out of the tone. So whatever kind of tone that you feel is coming from it at the moment will just get better with time. So literally just playing it will warm the instrument up, and eventually it will start to make it sound a lot nicer, and it will begin to settle in where it should be. Okay, better rosin on the bow will make a difference. I've got a separate video on rosin here, so please don't put comments underneath this video about what rosin you should get, because I'm going to put a separate video. I'll put, sorry, that's Billy Bob barking. I'll put a link to the video perhaps coming up or in the description bar underneath if the video has been released by the time you're watching this video. But there will be a separate rosin video coming out. So if you've got better quality rosin as well on the bow, that will make a difference. Of course, when you're playing it with the new dominant strings that you've put it there, or the better quality strings that you've got on the violin as well, all of these three things together will make a massive difference. You might think that what difference will a new bow make? What difference will new rosin make? Add that all together with the strings, the bow and the rosin, and it will make a massive difference. I promise you, you will be able to hear some difference. The chin rest, I've done videos on the chin rest before. Now I know the chin rest won't necessarily make a huge difference to the sound. It will make a slight tad difference, but I don't think it would be noticeable that you would be able to hear one or the other. But you can have a thinner chin rest. Again, I've done a chin rest video on these, so if I can remember I shall put the link, if not someone can remind me, and I shall put the link of that video underneath of where to get a nice comfortable thin chin rest. So that's a whole separate video. But yes, having a slightly less clunkier chin rest on your violin will make a difference because it's lighter, there's less product or less material sitting on your violin as well, and the less things that you've got attached to the violin or on the violin, and the less heavy they are, the better it's going to be, and the more of the sound of the violin is going to come out. Make sure the violin is in tune as well when each time you're playing it. If not, the violin starts to lose its overtones. So it starts to lose the kind of the resonance, because it will start, as you're playing the violin and you're warming it up, as I said earlier, you're almost convincing the violin that playing out of tune when the violin isn't in tune, you're convincing the violin that that is the new tune. It would be like playing a piece of music incorrectly again and again and again and again and again, and making you actually think that how you're playing it is correct, but it's not. Or it's like telling a little porcupine, telling a lie to somebody, and you've said it so many times that you've actually convinced yourself that that lie is actually real, even though it's not. So by playing the violin out of tune, you're making it lose its overtones as well, but you're also kind of, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, convincing the violin that that's the way it should be. So that's not going to be really good. That's not going to be very good for the sound either. So those are 6 tips in how to kind of pimp up or improve your violin. There are 2 other points that I've made as well, but these kind of involve a little bit more to be a little bit more invasive, I suppose, and something that you couldn't necessarily do yourself, or I would recommend you do yourself. And the first thing is changing the tail piece, which is this piece that you've got here that connects to the little bit. It connects to that, and it houses the strings and the fine tuners. If you've got a tailpiece which has fine tuners put in them that you can take in and out, they're going to be adding weight to it. So you can actually get tailpieces that have fine tuners almost built in them, so that when you put the strings in, it's not adding any extra weight by having separate fine tuners around. So you can alter the tailpiece, but again, it might be something that I would probably not recommend, because it means taking all of the strings off. It means putting a new tailpiece on. I would feel comfortable doing it. It wouldn't be a problem for me, and it wouldn't be a problem for me to do it for another student either. But if you've just got a violin, I would not recommend that you do this, because you just might come a cropper, or you might get yourself into a bit of trouble and not have the right tailpiece, and then the chin rest isn't in the right place, and you're kind of messing with too much. So I wouldn't advise that necessarily to do that, but if you took it to a violin repairer or some violin dealer or a violin luthier of some sort, he would be able to advise you and help you, but that would make a difference as well. Having a nicer bridge as well makes a massive, probably the second biggest difference, I'm going to go into the first main difference in a second, but the second biggest difference would be to have a nicer bridge. Again, I would probably recommend that you take it to a violin luthier, because they're going to put it back in the right place as well. They're going to remove it without any problems. You don't want to ruin the sound post. You don't want the sound post dropping out underneath as well if that's not been put in correctly. Because remember, at the moment the strings are pushing down onto the bridge, which is pushing onto the violin, which is keeping the sound post, which is inside. You won't be able to see on the video, but if you look in your violin, there's a sound post under the bridge. And if you take all that pressure off and the sound post isn't secured properly, then it can drop out and you're in all sorts of crazy trouble. So having a nice bridge, and again, I would go and see someone, because they will recommend their own bridge, or they will have their own bridge that they can recommend, rather than just buying a bridge, any old bridge off the internet. So the main difference would probably be the sound post. But folks, please do not touch your sound post yourself. You won't be able to get in there unless you've got specific instruments that will allow you to go in there and remove it. But I believe everything needs to be taken off first before the sound post gets put in. Depending on where the sound post is inside will depend hugely on the sound. If it is moved a millimeter in any direction, you will get a completely different sound. The violin I had before this one, I was changing some strings and the sound post fell out inside. It wasn't put in very well in the first place, but the sound post fell out. I took it to a guy, he fixed it for me, he put the sound post back, but because it was in a different place, I'm telling you, that violin did not sound the same again. I don't think the violin ever sounded right. I think I'd gone so many years of hearing a particular sound, the sound post had moved because it wasn't back in the same place. I just could never get used to the sound afterwards. So in that case, it wasn't for the better, but a sound post can be moved, and depending on where that is will depend on a completely different sound on the violin. So whether you think that's worth taking to a violin luthier or not, it might cost you, I don't know how much it would cost you to get the sound post changed, but you might be kind of better off investing that kind of money and putting it towards a better quality violin if you're going to do that. But if you do want to do that, if you're happy with the student quality one you've got and you want to do that, then that's fine. So yeah, so a few tips on how to pimp up or how to improve your violin, things that you can do at home, and then a couple of things that if you want to go that extra step further, you can take it to somebody and do that. But then again, you're kind of looking at paying them money to do that and paying for the accessories and paying for them to do that. You might just as well invest the extra money in getting a better violin altogether. So yeah, a few tips at least that you can do at home to improve the quality of your student violin. So thanks very much for watching. I hope it's helped, and I shall see you all next time.
Subscribe.